Well, our fighting Texas Aggies have to travel down to Williams-Brice Stadium for an electric atmosphere and a date with the Cocks. And yeah, I'll be holding my breath. I won't be sleeping easy. This is a real challenge. This is a real team. This is a team whose record doesn't indicate the level of play they're actually putting onto the football field, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Texas A&M is about to go face one of the best three defenses they'll face all year. And this is a year where they face Texas and Notre Dame. South Carolina is right up there with them. And if A&M wants to stay alive in a season where they have everything to play for, a breakthrough year one under Mike Elko, they cannot let up. I don't look at this as a trap game. I don't look at this as a sneaky game. This is a legit marquee SEC matchup versus our heated rivals, the South Carolina Gamecocks. Texas A&M currently sits as a 2.5-point favorite with a minuscule over-under of 44.5 points. And man, I think those numbers are pretty spot on, but we'll see if I agree, because today I'm going to give you my game breakdown at the end of the video. I'm going to give you my score prediction. And man, this is one that I've been battling back and forth with, because South Carolina is kind of a tough team to gauge, man. I mean, they're up and down offensively, but defensively, they're outright elite. They've done a lot of good things against several good offenses, including Alabama and LSU. Put themselves in position to win a lot of games, but have fallen short due to offensive mistakes and just, sometimes unlucky things in the game happen. And this is a team you could look at and say, hey, they could be 6-1. So it's a very interesting game. Texas A&M cannot let up for this one. Thank you for being here. Like and subscribe if you like this kind of content. I'm going to keep putting stuff out. Tune in for the watch party for the game Saturday night. We'll be going live right before the game kicks off at 6 o'clock. Game kicks off 6:30 Central Time. But let's talk about South Carolina. You know a lot about them. We've gone through 8 games so far in the year. Lenora Sellers, young quarterback, redshirt freshman, really good mindset, really impressive interview player, but he's still very much a raw quarterback. 7 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, strong player in play action. His best numbers come off of play action plays where he's completing 74% and 8 yards per attempt. That's by far his best category of plays, because they have a pretty nice 1-2 combo in the backfield with Rocket Sanders and Lenora Sellers, what you would kind of call an all-around quarterback, very much a downhill runner, big body. I think he's 235 pounds, stands at like 6'3". Couple of big bruisers to deal with, and if you start selling out for pass or run, they're going to make you pay. But he struggles under pressure. 41% completion rate under pressure. Of course, numbers typically go down under pressure, especially for a younger quarterback. But he's had 4 interceptions on the year, and all 4 interceptions have come under pressure plays. But dangerous quarterback. He can hit the big one. He can have his moments in a game, and he's someone that you just can't pin your ears back and go after, because he can run. They're doing really well in screen plays. I think some of their best numbers come off of screens. And, they have a decent receiver core. I am surprised that Nick Harbor hasn't really gotten going this year. I thought he was one of the most promising players in the conference. I think he's only had like 10 completions on the year. It's been an interesting year for him. But Rocket Sanders can absolutely change a game. He's like a bowling ball, man. You give him a head of steam, it seems like every yard he picks up, the harder he gets to take down. So these are bodies that can wear down a defense. These are bodies that you're going to have to prepare for mentally, because it's going to be a tiring, grueling game. But the good news for Texas A&M is that their O-line, I was kind of going back and forth on how to describe it, because last year it was disastrous. If it was disastrous last year, I'll just call it bad this year. They're second worst in sacks given up in the country, and they don't get a really good push in the running game consistently. And we know where Texas A&M is strongest. We know Texas A&M's front seven and the steps they've taken week to week, improving every week. And that was from a pretty good starting point in the year with the bodies you had in Shamar Turner, Shamar Stewart, and Nick Scorton. And, of course, Albert Regis, DJ Hicks coming on, linebacker crew has come on. You have a chance to really take advantage of the glaring weakness of their entire team. You're probably taking the strongest unit between the two teams in Texas A&M's front seven, and specifically their defensive line. Now, of course, they have a defensive line of their own that we're going to talk about in a second that's really, really good. I would say A&M's is a tick or two better than theirs, even how good theirs is, versus, I think, undoubtedly the worst aspect on the field this Saturday in their offensive line. So that's where I think Texas A&M can make their money in the game. But we'll get more into keys to the game later in the video. I want to get into their defense because obviously that's where they're making their money on the year. It is a legit top tier SEC defense this year. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. They have speed, they have athleticism, they have playmakers in the secondary. And that starts with Nick Emmanwori, high on NFL draft boards, ball hawk, dominated the game versus Oklahoma. I mean, he ended that game by himself with interceptions. And, he's a guy that will make you pay if you have a ball that flutters, if you're off timing, if your ball is not accurate. And they're going to try to force that with a very, very elite pass rush led by, we're calling him an alien, whatever you want to call him, Dylan Stewart, edge rusher, 5 sacks on the year. Elite athleticism, elite strength. Elite bend, elite twitch, true edge build, plus. He's 6'6", 6'7". This guy's going to, get offensive linemen off of him and use his speed to get around people. It's just an impressive player to watch. He's really an incredible athlete and an incredible football player. But it don't stop there. Senior Kyle Kennard, basically the senior version of Dylan Stewart. He leads in quarterback pressures, leads in sacks. He is everything that Dylan Stewart is. And, of course, Dylan Stewart brings all the hype because he's a true freshman, and it's amazing to see. But they have 2 elite talents that start for them at defensive end. They kind of go double edge rush look most times with their defense. And even in the run game, these guys can get after it because they're just so long and so athletic. So it's going to be a real challenge for A&M's much improved offensive line. But their interior D-line is pretty good too. They start Tonka Hemingway and Debo Williams. I would say somewhat slightly undersized for SEC defensive tackles, but they get penetration. They can be pass rush interior defensive linemen. So all that to say, legit pass rush, athletic, quick unit. Same goes for the linebackers, an extremely fast linebacker core. And we'll touch on special teams really quick, because how can you not touch on special teams when you're talking about a Shane Beamer coach team? It's Beamer ball. Expect at least one fake in the game. They've had a bye week to prepare for it. They were probably going to do it anyway. And now they've really prepared whatever the hell they're going to do. They won't give you the same fake twice. They'll mix it up. They'll do crazy things on crazy, unexpected points of the game and on the field. Expect it. And A&M got burnt with it once versus Arkansas, and that wasn't really a fake. That was a rugby-style punter who was given the green light to run to open daylight if it presented itself, and that happened. And since then, I think we've been faked on once or twice. I can't remember off the top of my head, and it hasn't worked. And I'm sure they'll be ready for it this game. But they're going to get creative with it, and they're going to hit you with it in unexpected ways. So be ready for that. Maybe an onside. They're going to do crazy things. All right. Let's talk about key matchups, keys to the game, all that kind of stuff. When A&M is on the field, obviously we're going back and forth between Marcel Reed and Connor Wigman. I personally think it'll be Marcel. I think a majority of people will think it's going to be Marcel Reed. I trust the coaching staff to make the choice. I trust the coaching staff to, make their choice and in the game reserve the right to be flexible and play whichever quarterback suits the game, whether it's due to the starter not playing up to snuff or just the look they're getting defensively. Whichever quarterback it is, whatever offensive game plan you go with in the game, you got to win the field position battle. Use Tyler White's leg. Do not be afraid to punt. Be safe on third down. I'm not saying don't be aggressive. I'm not saying do it at the jeopardy of making big plays. But if you're punting and you're giving this offense full fields to deal with, I think that's your best bet in the game. That's kind of my overarching key. Always the turnover thing. Yeah, that's always going to be a key. But missed field goals can give them an advantage. If you're kicking deep field goals and you're missing those and you give them a shorter field, that gives them a good chance. I have strong faith in this A&M front seven, this A&M defensive unit, to put in some absolute work in this game as long as you're not giving them short fields. If you're making Lenore Sellers and Rocket Sanders and a lackluster offensive line drive the entire field, much like we made LSU do in the game last week, you're going to win the game. You're going to win the game. Now, obviously, you have to score points. That's just kind of, the baseline right there. And how are you going to do that against a really good defense? I want to see us establish a running game on them. They've done a pretty good job stopping the run. They gave up 130 yards to LSU on the ground. That's right at their average. They have like 140 versus Ole Miss. I believe that's below their average. You know, they're a smaller defensive front. They make up for it with athleticism and just elite talent. But this is the best running attack they've gone against all year. This is the second best running attack statistically in the SEC. And we know this is a much improved offensive line. And when you have, this is an interesting topic in its own. If you start Marcel Reed and you're running a bunch of zone read plays and you're going to opt to read off one of those elite edge rushers, you got to be decisive with it. You got to be quick with it, because we've seen what players like Nick Scorton can do against that mesh point on zone read types of plays. Good players will just attack that mesh, remain flexible, and tackle either player. So you have to be super decisive, because we've seen Brady Cook, try to run a zone read against Nick Scorton, hesitate a little bit, get the play blown up. We saw it happen with Taylon Green and Jaquindon Jackson. We've seen Shamar Stewart and Nick Scorton blow those guys up. They're capable of doing that too. But I really like Marcel Reed's decisiveness as a runner. He's really fast. But what Marcel Reed brings is also just really good running instincts, the wiggle, the jukes, but also the ability to line up and use his blockers and just be an instinctual runner. That bodes well, and I think you're going to want to read some of these guys off. But really, I want to see them run inside, attack these more penetrating build defensive tackles, and see if you can just get a push that way with your big offensive line that's just been a really good unit all year. I think you've only given up like 8 or 9 sacks on the year, Texas A&M versus them, who've given up 32 sacks on the year, just to put it in perspective, just to put offensive lines in perspective. A&M's second best running attack in the SEC, like we just talked about. If you can establish a running game on them and you can prevent turnovers and just move the ball, you're going to win the game. Those are your paths to victory right there offensively. So, yeah, I believe they can do it. And I know South Carolina fans and faithful will say, oh, I would love to see you try to run against us. I would love to see us try to run against it, because I think that's where A&M can make their money in the game. So, for South Carolina stopping Texas A&M, can you contain that run? Can you stop the run? Can you force A&M to pass, whether it's Marcel Reed or Connor Wigman? Because if you can, that's your path to victory. Because if you look at A&M as a team, everything's going really, really well all over the field except for one area, the passing game. Whichever quarterback's been out there besides the Missouri game, A&M has not established a passing game. It's the big glaring weakness on A&M. It's just the ability for the quarterback to form a connection with receivers. Now, A&M doesn't have an elite receiver core. The words I've used to describe it is it's not a core that strikes fear into the hearts of secondaries. But I do think they're a little bit underrated. I think they have gotten their fair share of separation, but there's just been a lack of consistency amongst the whole unit. Last week, we saw Connor Wigman miss guys, but we also saw guys not get open at times, or we saw opportunities there that were taken away because you were giving up leakage inside. You were giving up, free lanes to the quarterback and couldn't find a rhythm. And that has too often been the case this year. When Marcel Reed was the quarterback versus Bowling Green versus Arkansas, and teams had a full week to game plan for Marcel Reed, they were able to drop back in zone and just cloud things up, and Marcel couldn't read it, and Marcel couldn't figure it out. So if you can establish a running game, that gives them a really, really good chance to pin their ears back, get after you on third downs. So A&M's running ability in this game will very much dictate where the game goes, in my opinion. But for South Carolina offensively, they got to hit that play action hard. They're obviously good at play action because they have a really good threat of run. It also could potentially give their quarterback an opportunity to roll out and extend plays, which he can do very well. And A&M at times on the year has been susceptible to play action. So for South Carolina, you got to find a running game somehow, at least make it a threat. You got good athletes. It's just the offensive line that gives you trouble. And if you can do that, you can get A&M secondary off balance. You have a chance to hit some big plays, because we know A&M's given up 1 or 2 explosives per game most games in the year. Even the Missouri game, the big blowout, you gave up a big explosive in the game. So look out for that. That's going to be South Carolina's key. Can they hit some big plays in the game? Because A&M has been susceptible to them. Real quick on A&M secondary, I know A&M is in the 90s in run defense on the year. What A&M does really well, and of course they've given up those explosives. Those are going to count against you. Those are why the numbers are what they are. But what A&M has done really well in the year is force teams into field goals and stiffen up in the red zone. And they have allowed a good share of underneath balls, but they've tackled well, besides early in the LSU game, but they've tackled well to bottle that stuff up. So I don't know if those numbers are truly indicative of where this A&M secondary is, because I couldn't be higher on the secondary right now, especially with the emergence of BJ Mays at nickel. It feels like this is a defense that really doesn't have a hole right now. We love our safeties. Dalton Brooks, Bryce Anderson, Marcus Radcliffe, Trey Jones. You are legitimately 4 deep in safety. They run mixed coverage. It's really, really solid right now. And, of course, our boundary guys, you have Will Lee, who's, I think, an elite corner. And I think a lot of people agree with that. And I think NFL draft boards agree with that. Right now, he's probably like a 3rd rounder, but he has potential to be much higher than that if he can finish the year strong. He has everything you would want in a boundary corner. And then Des Rick's kind of the wild card. Obviously, all the talent in the world at the other corner spot. Young guy. That's a guy you're going to want to test if you're South Carolina on some shots. And, you know, LSU had some success on him, but in the critical plays in the game, Des Ricks came up big on one-on-one coverage. So I'm saying all this to say I think A&M's secondary is up to the challenge as long as they can hold their water on play actions. So those are my keys. A&M can't allow the explosives. A&M, needs to just force long fields for them to drive down. A&M needs to establish a running game. South Carolina needs to stop a running game. That's just the big swing point in the game, in my opinion, is A&M's ability to run the ball. And they got to take their shots. So here's my score prediction after all that. I predict an under. I think this thing is going under the 44 points. I think this is a true defensive game. And, this is probably a hot take, but I think A&M controls the game. I think the paths that I've laid out in this game are very much there for A&M to enact. I foresee A&M's ability to establish a run in this game. I just think A&M has been really good blocking this year. I think this O-line has come a long, long way, and I know you're missing one of your key guys in Chase Basantis, but we saw that unit lock in late in the game versus LSU. So as long as there's no hangover, and we really trust Mike Elko to prevent that, I think A&M wins this game 28-13. I think it's a relatively convincing win. I think A&M takes care of business. And I know a lot of people are saying, don't sleep on South Carolina. This is a really good team. They don't have the record to show it. I've said that. I acknowledge that. I agree with that. But don't sleep on A&M. This is a team that has answered the bell time and time again. This is a team that's getting better every single week. We've seen improvement at every single position. Every week we've gone forward in the season with a couple of hiccups. The Bowling Green was a hiccup. Passing game versus Arkansas was a hiccup. Improvement's not always linear, something we always talk about on this channel. But the improvement is absolutely there, especially defensively. So I think A&M shuts them down. I think A&M establishes a run. And I think A&M gets out of Dodge with the win. So, guys, what is your score prediction? Do you agree with my analysis? I'm sure South Carolina fans will take issue to my score. That's fine. Tell me why. I'm totally open to interpretation and ideas. I want to hear from you. So thank you guys for watching. Like and subscribe. I'll see you guys on the watch party Saturday night, 6 o'clock. Tune in. We'll be here. We'll have a great time. Gig 'em.